Hello, my name is Ekaterini. I'm from the Dollard Center of the Arts, and today I will be showing you some face paint designs for Saint Jean-Baptiste. So I will be going through and guiding you through 3 different face paint designs. But before we begin the tutorial, I'm just going to start by going over the material that we need. So firstly, of course, we will need some face paint. So this is the brand that I use over here. You could use any type of face paint and you could find it at any art store. So the inside looks like this. And I just prefer these ones because you could take out the paint, and there's usually 3 different colors or shades of the color, which makes it a lot easier for mixing. You will need, of course, some paint brushes, and they don't have to be like any specific face paint brushes. They could just be paint brushes. Just make sure that they are soft and they are clean because they will be going on the face. So here I have 2 flat brushes. I like to use a larger one and a smaller one for smaller details. And I also have 2 pointier brushes. So I have a larger one over here and a smaller one, which is also very good for details. We will need a face sponge as well, some water, because face paint is water-based, so it activates with water. And of course, you will also need some paper towels, so you could just dry off the brushes when you're using them and when you're dipping them in water. So without further ado, let's go into the tutorials. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab my sponge, and I'm going to make sure it's damp first. And then once I make sure it's all damp, I'm going to dip it in some blue paint. And I'm going to go ahead and contour her face. So I'm just doing above her eyebrow, her temples, and all the way to her upper cheek and cheekbone. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to go on the other side and do the same thing for the other side. So again, her temple, her cheekbone, and just a little bit of her cheek as well. Then I'm grabbing the larger pointy brush, and I'm making sure it's damp because we want to activate that face paint. And I'm going to dip it in some white paint. And once I have that white paint, we're going to go in and start to do the little symbol for Quebec. So I'm starting with a thick line on top, and then just 2 curved lines right next to that, connecting at the bottom tips. Then I'm going to do a line right horizontally and a line at the bottom. You're going to see at the other side I'm doing the same thing. So a line straight down, a thick line, and then like I said, 2 curved lines right next to it that connect at the tip. And then a horizontal at the bottom, and a sort of cross shape right at the bottom of that horizontal line as well. And there we have our little shape, our symbol for Quebec, for Saint Jean-Baptiste. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and just press lightly with our large pointy brush and do 2 little sort of flower petal shapes right on the side. After that, I'm taking some more white paint, and I'm going to do a curved line right on her temple. And after that, I'm just making a curve right on top of that curve that I did, and sort of bringing the tip of it in, and then just another curve right on top of her eyebrow, right under the last curve. Then I'm pressing my brush gently just to create a sort of petal effect. And then after the little petals that I did on the top, we're doing the exact same thing on the other side. So I have my little curve where her temple is, then right on top of that, I'm doing another curve. It's a little bit different than the one on the other side, but it's okay. And then I'm going in ahead and doing another curve right on the bottom of that one, just like I did before. Right on top of her eyebrow, just like that. And there you have it. So now for the next look, we're going to do the same thing. We're just putting some blue on the temple, on the cheekbones, and then I'm getting the smallest pointy brush, and I'm going to go ahead again with some white paint. And once I got that white paint going, I'm gonna go in right around where her nose is, right where the level of her eyes are, and I'm gonna create a curve that goes through her eyebrows. So I'm using her eyebrows as a sort of guide to do that curve. You're going to see more clearly now. I'm going to do it on the other side. So right at the level where her eyes are, on her nose, and then going through the eyebrows to make that line. And so you should have two curves that begin at the nose at the level of the eyes and go through the eyebrows all the way to the temple. So now I'm just going back in with some more paint and creating a curve at the top like that. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and you want to make sure that your brush has enough paint, because since you're going through the eyebrows, there's a lot of paint that gets lost in the hairs of the eyebrows. So just make sure there's enough paint on your brush while you're doing that. So after I have the two lines there, I'm going to grab some more white paint. And I'm going to create a similar line, but just above her eyebrows. And I'm going to round up the back of the line, just like that. So it's a similar line that begins right where her eyebrows start and curves up at the ends. Then I'm grabbing some more white paint. And I'm just fixing those lines up and making sure they're nice and thick. After that, I'm going to create a sort of heart shape, like two lines that sort of create a heart, but they're not going to be touching each other, just at the center of her forehead like that. So like a sort of cane shape. Two cane lines. And then after that, I'm creating a curved line right under her eye, and the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to do like sort of a half circle shape and bring it up toward her eye, and I'm doing the same exact thing right under that. After that, I'm just pressing my brush gently under her eyes, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And then I'm going to press lightly again right next to those two cane shapes on both sides to have these sort of petals. And then I'm going to do the same thing right in between her eyebrows. Now I'm just touching up, making sure everything is nice and thick. And so there you have it. And the last little thing I'm going to do is just add some dots. So I added 2 dots above the curve that's near her eyebrow. I added 1 dot above the one that's going through her eyebrow. And then I'm adding 2 at the side of her face over there. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So putting some dots on the side of her face, like that. And then 2 above the one that is directly above her eyebrow, and then 1 above the one that goes through her eyebrow. And that's the look. So now the next one we're gonna do is a tiger. And I'm dipping my sponge again in that orange color. And I'm gonna go all around her face, but above the mouth. So we're basically covering her whole face except the eyelids and everything above her lips. You want to make sure that you don't get it close to the eyes, because sometimes it's not good for the eyes. It could be toxic and it could be hard to remove. So I'm just making sure I have her nose. We could do above the lips, and making sure everything is completely full. And that's how it should look. After that, I'm going in with the smallest pointy brush, and I'm going to do a similar thing that we did in the previous video, in the previous tutorial. So I'm taking the black and I'm starting at her nose at the level of the eyes, and again I'm gonna go through her eyebrow. I'm making a line that goes through her eyebrow all the way to her temple, and then after that I'm gonna do another line at the level of where her eyes end that meet the line I made at the temple, and I want to make sure that I do it on both sides. After that, I'm just making a curved line around her mouth, like that. And then I'm gonna add just like 2 tiny lines that are coming out of it, like that. So you already have a sort of cat look. Now the next part is the ears. So I'm making a line going up at the end of her forehead, and then making another line, meeting that line, and then another one at the total end of her eyebrows, meeting both those lines. So one where her eyebrow begins, one where it's the middle of her eyebrow, and another one at the end of her eyebrow. And then 2 lines right under her eyes, like that. And this is going to give the stripe effect of the tiger. After those 2 lines, I'm going to make a very thick line right under her eyes on both sides again. So just make sure that line is right under her eyes and it's nice and thick. And after that, I'm making another line under that one that sort of curves upward. And I'm gonna make them not touch. They're 2 separate thick lines that are under her eyes. And then after that, I'm making, in between those 2 thick lines, I'm making a sort of triangle shape, but a triangle with no base, so it's sort of like the point of an arrow. So it looks like that. So one point of an arrow and then a smaller one in the inside. So here you're going to see more clearly. a little point of the arrow right there, in between those two thick lines we just made under the eyes, and then inside that another smaller and thinner little point of arrow. Then in between the ears we're just making two lines, they're not going to touch, and then in between that two little points of arrows going downward, pointing toward her nose. Then I'm grabbing the larger pointy brush, and I'm gonna go in with some black, and similar to how I've done before, I'm just gonna press it on her forehead. And in the other looks I was pressing it to make a sort of petal, but now we're gonna use this to make the illusion of fur. So I'm gonna do one in the middle and then two next to it, and that's gonna make it look a little bit like fur on the top. And then here I'm just going in with the same brush and covering the bottom of her nose completely, just the bottom, to give that tiger nose. Then right after that I'm doing a line where from her nose to her cupid's bow. And then finally, I'm just gonna do a line on top of her lips, and that's the final look. I'd like to thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful Saint Jean Baptiste.